The orange traffic cones appeared at 6:43 a.m. on a Tuesday, blocking the only road to Daniel Morrison's driveway. Daniel, a 42-year-old civil engineer who'd spent 15 years designing municipal infrastructure across 3 counties, sat in his truck staring at the handwritten sign zip-tied to the barricade. Private road, no through traffic HOA enforcement. 3 months. 3 months since Patricia Hendricks had been elected HOA president on a platform of restoring neighborhood exclusivity. 3 months of increasingly aggressive attempts to control every aspect of Maple Ridge Drive. But this morning was different. This morning, Patricia had made a mistake so fundamental, so legally catastrophic, that Daniel almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because what Patricia didn't know, what she hadn't bothered to research before declaring war on the one resident with the expertise to destroy her, was that Daniel didn't just understand property law. He'd written portions of the county's right-of-way ordinances, and he was about to teach her exactly what happens when entitlement collides with actual legal authority. Before we dive into how a civil engineer systematically dismantled an HOA president's power grab using nothing but public records and patience, if you love stories where entitled people discover they're not actually in charge, hit that like button and subscribe. Now, let's see exactly how this unfolded. This is a story in 3 parts. The violation that pushed a professional too far, the confrontation where actual authority met imagined power, and the resolution where legal reality came crashing down. The violation started small: parking restrictions, noise complaints filed for normal daytime activities, threatening letters about lawn height measured with rulers. But Patricia Hendricks wasn't satisfied with petty tyranny. She wanted control of the entire street, convinced her HOA presidency gave her dominion over public infrastructure. For 3 months, Daniel watched her overstep, each incident more brazen than the last. He documented everything, cross-referenced property records, and waited for her to cross the line from annoying to actionable. The toll it took wasn't financial. It was the daily indignity of being treated like a trespasser on his own property. Until the morning she physically blocked his access, Daniel had hoped reason might prevail. That hope died at 6:43 a.m. The confrontation didn't happen immediately. Daniel's decades of engineering experience had taught him that the most devastating victories come from preparation, not emotion. When he finally approached Patricia with county maps, surveyor reports, and legal documentation, she laughed in his face. That laughter wouldn't last. The moment she realized that the road she'd claimed belonged to the HOA was actually a public right-of-way, and that Daniel personally owned the easement documentation proving it, her expression shifted from smugness to panic. But Daniel wasn't finished. He discovered something far more interesting during his research. Patricia had been collecting road maintenance fees from residents for 18 months. Fees for maintaining a road she didn't own. The resolution involved county officials, very confused HOA board members, and a special meeting where Patricia's entire agenda collapsed in under 40 minutes. The punishment fit the crime perfectly, not through Daniel's revenge, but through Patricia's own documented pattern of overreach. Resignations were tendered, refunds were issued, and Daniel Morrison finally got to drive to his own house without orange cones blocking his way. But the real satisfaction came from something quieter, watching someone who'd wielded perceived power discover they'd never actually had any at all. Here's exactly how it happened. Daniel Morrison had purchased 847 Maple Ridge Drive 7 years earlier, specifically because the property offered direct access to the county's main arterial road through a quiet residential street. As a senior civil engineer for Morrison and Associates, he'd spent his career planning road systems, analyzing traffic patterns, and navigating the complex intersection of private property and public infrastructure. His home was modest, a renovated 1970s ranch on 2 acres, but its location was perfect for his consulting work, which often required early morning site visits across the county. He was methodical, quiet, and had served 3 years on the neighborhood planning committee before the HOA drama began. His wife had been the social one. After her death from cancer 2 years ago, Daniel had withdrawn somewhat, focusing on work and his teenage daughter Emma, who was now away at college. He wasn't unfriendly, just private. which made him the perfect target for someone looking to establish dominance. Patricia Hendricks moved into the neighborhood 14 months ago and immediately ran for HOA president with campaign promises about restoring standards and protecting property values. She won by 8 votes in a subdivision of 43 homes, mostly because only 18 people bothered to vote. Patricia, 51, was a former real estate agent who'd retired early after a successful career flipping properties in wealthier developments. She had opinions about everything: fence heights, mailbox styles, the acceptable color range for front doors, and she viewed her HOA presidency as a CEO position rather than a volunteer coordination role. Her husband, a semi-retired insurance executive, enabled her entirely. They had no children, 2 luxury vehicles, and a meticulously landscaped corner lot that Patricia referenced constantly as setting the standard. The violations started small. 6 weeks after Patricia took office, Daniel received his first notice. A formal letter stating his truck, which he parked in his own driveway, violated the commercial vehicle restriction despite being a standard F-150 with a small company logo. Daniel ignored it. His truck was grandfathered under previous HOA rules, and besides, half the neighborhood drove similar vehicles. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived, this time claiming his lawn had been measured at 3.2 inches when HOA policy specified a maximum of 3 inches. Daniel measured his lawn himself. It was 2.5 inches. He called Patricia, who informed him that the measurement stands and he'd be fined $50 if it wasn't addressed within 5 days. He paid the fine rather than fight, focused on a major project deadline. That was his first mistake. The escalation happened rapidly. Patricia began filing noise complaints about Daniel's early morning departures, claiming his truck engine disturbed her sleep, despite her house being 4 properties away and Daniel leaving after 7 a.m. She circulated a petition to ban all commercial vehicles from overnight parking, specifically mentioning certain residents who treat our neighborhood like a construction yard. When that failed to gain traction, she shifted tactics. She convinced 2 other board members that Maple Ridge Drive itself needed access management to prevent non-resident cut-through traffic. Never mind that Maple Ridge was a dead-end street serving only neighborhood residents. Patricia insisted the road had become too busy and needed restrictions. Then came the breaking point. Daniel returned from a 3-day surveying project to find a certified letter in his mailbox. The HOA was implementing road access fees of $75 per month for maintenance and security of Maple Ridge Drive. The letter, signed by Patricia with 2 co-signatories, stated that failure to pay would result in restricted access privileges. Daniel read the letter twice, then pulled up the county property database on his laptop. He spent 4 hours that evening reviewing records he should have checked months ago. What he found made his jaw tighten. Patricia had been collecting these fees from 22 households for 18 months, accumulating over $23,000 in an HOA account designated for street infrastructure. But Maple Ridge Drive wasn't HOA property. It never had been. Daniel tried the reasonable approach first. He called Patricia and requested a meeting to discuss the road access fee structure. She agreed to meet at her house the following Saturday, her tone suggesting she expected him to grovel or negotiate. When Daniel arrived with a folder of documents, Patricia greeted him at her door with crossed arms and a practiced smile. He presented the county property map showing Maple Ridge Drive as a dedicated public right-of-way, maintained by county funds since the subdivision was developed in 1968. Patricia glanced at the documents and waved them away. That's outdated information. The HOA assumed maintenance responsibility 6 years ago. We have paperwork. Daniel asked to see that paperwork. Patricia claimed it was in storage and suggested Daniel consult a lawyer if he had concerns. He left her house knowing exactly what would happen next. She would escalate. She always did. The police call came on a Wednesday afternoon. An officer appeared at Daniel's door, responding to a complaint that he'd threatened the HOA president during a property dispute. Daniel calmly explained the situation, showed the officer his documentation, and the matter was dropped with an apology. But the humiliation stung. Patricia had weaponized law enforcement over a conversation about publicly available property records. 2 weeks later, she went further. The orange cones appeared on a Tuesday morning, physically blocking access to Daniel's driveway. The handwritten sign declared the road private and subject to HOA enforcement. Daniel sat in his truck, engine idling, and made a decision. He was done being reasonable. He called his office and cleared his schedule for the week. Then he drove to the county recorder's office, the municipal planning department, and the district surveyor's office. He pulled every document related to Maple Ridge Drive dating back to the original subdivision plat in 1967. He reviewed easement agreements, right-of-way dedications, maintenance transfer records, and HOA incorporation documents. He cross-referenced tax maps with utility access agreements. And what he discovered was even better than he'd hoped. Not only was Patricia completely wrong about road ownership, she'd been systematically violating county ordinances for 18 months while collecting fees for services she had no legal authority to provide. If they wanted to play games, Daniel would show them what games really looked like. And on Friday afternoon, with a 3-inch binder of documentation and a list of county contacts, everything was finally ready. Daniel didn't remove the traffic cones. Instead, he photographed them from 6 angles, noting the date, time, and GPS coordinates. He documented the blocked access, the handwritten sign, and the clear violation of county right-of-way ordinances that prohibited unauthorized traffic control devices on public roads. Then he made a phone call to someone who actually had authority, Marcus Chen, director of the county's Public Works Department, whom Daniel had worked with on 4 major infrastructure projects over the past decade. Marcus listened to Daniel's explanation, asked 3 clarifying questions, and said he'd have someone at Maple Ridge Drive within 2 hours. Daniel thanked him and made his second call, this one to the HOA board treasurer, William Hoffman, a retired accountant who'd been increasingly uncomfortable with Patricia's aggressive leadership style. The county road supervisor arrived at 3:47 p.m. in a clearly marked truck. He examined the cones, photographed them, checked the road against county records on his tablet, and removed them immediately. He left Daniel a citation number and mentioned that unauthorized traffic control on public right-of-way could result in fines up to $1,500. 30 minutes later, Patricia's silver Mercedes screeched to a stop in front of Daniel's house. She emerged from the vehicle with her phone already raised, filming. "You had no right to remove HOA property. That's theft. I'm calling the police." Daniel stood on his porch, holding his binder of documents, and spoke calmly. "Patricia, please put your phone down. We need to talk about Maple Ridge Drive." Her expression shifted from outrage to condescension. "There's nothing to talk about. The HOA maintains this road. We have every right to control access." Daniel opened his binder. "No, you don't, and I can prove it." He held up the first document, the original subdivision plat from 1967, clearly showing Maple Ridge Drive as a dedicated public right-of-way, deeded to the county upon subdivision approval. Patricia squinted at it. "That's ancient history. Things changed." Daniel produced the second document, the county's current road maintenance database, showing Maple Ridge Drive under continuous county jurisdiction since 1968. Patricia's confidence wavered slightly, but she recovered. "Our lawyer reviewed everything. The HOA has maintenance responsibility." Daniel smiled without warmth. "Then your lawyer is incompetent, because here's what actually happened." He walked her through it methodically, like explaining a blueprint to a client. In 1968, the county accepted dedication of Maple Ridge Drive as part of subdivision approval. The road became public property, maintained by county road crews, funded by county taxes. The HOA was formed in 1972, but its jurisdiction explicitly excluded county roads. That was in the original HOA covenants, which Daniel had also pulled. Patricia remained silent, but her face was reddening. Daniel continued. 6 years ago, during a budget crisis, the county had offered neighborhoods the option to take over road maintenance in exchange for reduced fees. 3 neighborhoods accepted. Maple Ridge wasn't one of them. There was no transfer agreement, no maintenance contract, no legal basis for HOA control. "So when you started collecting road access fees 18 months ago," Daniel said quietly, "you were charging residents for services you weren't providing, on property you don't own, with authority you don't have." Patricia's mouth opened and closed. "The board approved it. We have documentation." Daniel pulled another sheet. I spoke with William Hoffman this afternoon. He said you brought the proposal to the board as a neighborhood beautification fund and never mentioned it was specifically for road access control. He was never shown a legal opinion. Neither was anyone else. Patricia's eyes widened. You contacted my board members? That's interference. Daniel's voice remained level. They're not your board members. They represent the community. And they deserve to know that the president they elected has been systematically violating county ordinances while collecting over $23,000 in unauthorized fees. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then Patricia tried a different approach, her voice dropping to something almost conciliatory. Look, maybe there was some confusion about the legal details, but we can work this out. The fees were for improvements, better lighting, speed bumps, things the county wasn't providing. Daniel shook his head. You can't install speed bumps on county roads without county approval. You didn't apply for approval. I checked. And the lighting proposal was rejected by the Planning Commission 8 months ago because it violated dark sky ordinances. You installed them anyway. Patricia's face went pale. Those are minor procedural issues. Daniel closed his binder. No, Patricia, they're violations of county code, but here's what happens next. He laid out the options with the same precision he used for engineering specifications. Option 1. Patricia could resign from the HOA board immediately, refund all collected road access fees to residents, and formally acknowledge to the county that the HOA had overstepped its authority. The county would issue a warning citation, but no fines. Daniel would not pursue personal legal action for the harassment, false police reports, or defamation. The matter would end. Option 2. Patricia could refuse. In which case Daniel would file a formal complaint with the county regarding unauthorized traffic control, illegal fee collection, and unpermitted infrastructure modifications. He would also provide the district attorney's office with documentation of what could reasonably be investigated as fraud, collecting fees for services not rendered under false claims of authority. Additionally, every resident who'd paid road access fees would be informed they were entitled to full refunds and could pursue individual legal action. And finally, Daniel would file a personal restraining order based on the pattern of harassment documented over 3 months. Patricia stared at him. You can't do this. You don't have the authority. Daniel's expression didn't change. I don't need authority. I have facts, public records, county contacts who have worked with me for 15 years and will confirm every document I'm showing you. Your entire road control scheme collapses under the most basic legal scrutiny. The only question is whether you want to end this quietly or publicly. He gave her 48 hours to decide and walked back into his house. Through the window, he watched her stand motionless on his driveway for nearly 3 minutes before returning to her car. She sat inside for another 5 minutes, phone pressed to her ear. When she finally drove away, Daniel poured himself a bourbon and smiled for the first time in weeks. The emergency HOA board meeting was called for Thursday evening at 7 p.m. in the community center. Patricia hadn't responded to Daniel's ultimatum, but William Hoffman had contacted him Tuesday afternoon with an unusual request. Would Daniel be willing to attend the meeting and present his findings to the full board? Daniel agreed immediately. He arrived at 6:55 p.m. with his documentation binder, a laptop with digital copies, and a USB drive for the board's records. 23 residents attended, the largest turnout anyone could remember. Patricia sat at the head table flanked by 2 other board members, her expression carefully neutral. When William called the meeting to order, he yielded the floor to Daniel within 2 minutes. Daniel's presentation was devastating in its simplicity. He displayed the county property maps on the community center's projector screen, walking through the legal history of Maple Ridge Drive with the patient clarity of an engineer explaining load-bearing calculations. He showed the subdivision plat, the dedication documents, the county maintenance records. He explained how right-of-way law worked, why HOAs couldn't simply claim public roads, and what legal authority actually required. The room was silent except for the click of his presentation slides. Then he addressed the fees. 22 households had been charged $75 monthly for 18 months. Total collected, $23,850. He displayed the HOA's publicly filed budget documents, showing the money sitting in an account labeled Street Infrastructure Fund. He asked what improvements had been made. No one answered. Patricia finally spoke, her voice tight. Those funds were being reserved for future improvements pending county approval. Daniel advanced to his next slide. The lighting installation Patricia had authorized 8 months ago after the Planning Commission rejection. Cost, $12,400, paid from the Street Infrastructure Fund to a contractor who happened to be Patricia's brother-in-law. The room erupted. Residents who'd been paying fees demanded to know why money collected for road maintenance had been spent on rejected lighting. Board members who hadn't been informed about the lighting contract stared at Patricia in shock. William Hoffman's face was grim. "Patricia, did you authorize that expenditure without board vote?" Patricia's carefully maintained composure cracked. "It was within my discretionary authority as president." William pulled out the HOA bylaws. "Your discretionary limit is $500. Anything over that requires board approval. We never voted on this." The meeting deteriorated rapidly. Another resident stood up, Margaret Chen, a retired lawyer who'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. She'd reviewed Daniel's documentation before the meeting and had some questions. Had Patricia consulted with legal counsel before implementing road access fees? No. Had she verified HOA jurisdiction over the road? No. Had she disclosed to fee-paying residents that the fees weren't legally required? No. Had she obtained proper permits for the lighting installation? No. Margaret's questions became sharper. Had Patricia knowingly misrepresented HOA authority to collect fees from residents? Had she intentionally obscured the lighting expenditure from board review? Had she filed accurate financial reports? Patricia's answers became defensive, then hostile. She accused Daniel of targeting her, Margaret of undermining board authority, and the other board members of betraying their president. It was a spectacular collapse. William Hoffman called for a vote of no confidence at 8:47 p.m. It passed unanimously minus Patricia's vote. He then motioned for her immediate resignation. Patricia refused. "You can't force me out. I was elected." Margaret stood again, this time with her own binder. "Actually, we can. HOA bylaws specify that board members can be removed for malfeasance, defined as unauthorized expenditures, misrepresentation of HOA authority, or actions that expose the HOA to legal liability. You've committed all three. You can resign voluntarily tonight, or we'll hold a special election next week and remove you by community vote. Your choice." The room waited. Patricia looked around at faces that had once been friendly, or at least neutral, and saw only disappointment and anger. She gathered her papers, stood, and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. William immediately took over as interim president. His first motion, full refund of all road access fees to affected residents to be processed within 30 days, passed unanimously. Second motion, formal apology to the county for unauthorized traffic control, passed unanimously. Third motion, public acknowledgement that Maple Ridge Drive is and has always been county property, passed unanimously. 1 month later, Daniel sat on his back porch on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, watching Emma help him install a new mailbox. The old one had been damaged when Patricia's supporters briefly vandalized his property in retaliation before legal warnings made them reconsider. The road access fee refunds had been issued. Patricia and her husband had listed their house for sale and moved to a rental property across town while waiting for the sale to close. The lighting installation Patricia had authorized was being removed at HOA expense after the county issued a formal violation notice. William Hoffman had proven to be an effective president, quietly competent and focused on actual community needs rather than power displays. The neighborhood had settled into a peaceful routine. No more orange cones, no more threatening letters, no more manufactured crises. Daniel's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Chen at the County Public Works Department. They'd reviewed the entire situation and were implementing new protocols to prevent HOA overreach on public infrastructure. Marcus credited Daniel's documentation as the catalyst. Daniel replied with thanks and returned to his coffee. Emma looked at him curiously. "Do you think she learned anything?" Daniel considered that. Patricia had spent 18 months building a structure of imagined authority, collecting money she had no right to collect, making decisions she had no power to make. And it had all collapsed because she'd finally targeted someone who actually understood the systems she'd been pretending to control. "Maybe," he said finally, "but I think the real lesson is for everyone else. That you can't just declare yourself in charge of things that don't belong to you. That actual authority requires actual power. And that sooner or later, someone will know the difference. Emma smiled and handed him another screw. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the morning sun warming the porch. Daniel thought about his wife, who would have handled Patricia with humor and grace rather than legal documentation. But his wife wasn't here, and Daniel had fought the only way he knew how, with facts, patience, and the meticulous understanding of systems that had defined his career. Patricia Hendricks had learned that some people's power comes from positions they claim. Others' power comes from knowledge they've earned. And in the end, knowledge always wins. As Daniel tightened the final bolt on the mailbox and stepped back to admire the work, he felt something he hadn't felt in months: peace. Because justice, served through the careful application of legal reality, was deeply satisfying. Across the country in Portland, Oregon, a community garden coordinator named Lisa Tran received a cease and desist letter from her new neighbor demanding she remove the unsightly vegetable plots that were diminishing property values. The neighbor, a tech executive who'd paid $2.3 million for the adjacent lot, threatened legal action within 7 days. Lisa smiled, the same smile she'd worn when presenting her master's thesis on urban agriculture policy to the city council 3 years ago, the thesis that had become the foundation for Portland's protected community garden ordinance. She pulled out her city council resolution, signed by the mayor, designating her garden as a permanent green space with legal protections against nuisance complaints. "Please," she said quietly to the letter, "keep threatening. I'd love to see someone try to bulldoze a city-protected space. The neighbor's lawyer would call by tomorrow, but that's a story for another time."